Now let's go to the regions, where locals are rallying against the Labour government's renewables agenda after a new IPA report found that Australia could lose 1/3 of its productive agricultural land to solar panels, wind farms and transmission infrastructure as we crash headlong to net zero. Joining me now to get across the details is Deputy Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild, who joins us live from Mildura. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me tonight on Credilin. Take us through the findings of your report and what it would mean if we were to be, as they say, a renewable energy superpower off the basis of wind and solar, and the effect that this would have on communities like where you are right now.
Well, James, great to be with you. And as you identified, our research that you reported on today in the Daily Telegraph and across the nation is that under the net zero energy superpower that this government is pursuing, we would as a nation lose up to 1/3 of our prime agricultural farmland. And it's communities like here in Mildura. And today we've also been across the border in Renmark and Berry talking to locals about what this will mean, that are going to be suffering the consequences of this, and the issues will be profound. From a food security perspective, our production will decline rapidly. If you think prices are going up and are bad at the moment, just wait until what happens under net zero when we lose our farmland, when we've got wind turbines and solar panels across them. And it's also a massive energy security issue. As you know, James, about 90% of the minerals and rare earths that you need to construct wind turbines and solar panels are imported from China. So we're giving up our energy. We're giving up our energy sovereignty, losing our food security, and it's causing massive dislocation and disruption in farming communities like here in Mildura.
All while getting the CCP rich, Daniel. Now, tell me, how do the locals in places like Mildura, who have you spoken to? What are they saying when you speak to them? And how are the politics of this playing out?
Well, James, they're revolting. Farmers and local communities are revolting against Labor's net zero mandates. They haven't been consulted on this. As I said, it's dividing the community, it's undermining their local prosperity. It'll impact every Australian. So if you're sitting at home in the city or urban areas and you think this is just an issue for farmers, well, as I said before, when the production of our food goes down, your grocery bills will go up. And James, this is very similar. I was on this program back in June of this year in Western Australia, talking about the Aboriginal cultural heritage laws in Western Australia. And there was a revolt over there against the inner city elites, the bureaucrats and the woke activists that were pushing this onto the regions. And we saw that there was a massive back down there from the government in Western Australia. I'm getting a sense that something very similar now is building across regional communities such as where we are. They're seething in anger. And there's a lot of resentment towards these inner city politicians and bureaucrats that, you know, they're not coming out here. They're not listening to the communities here who are suffering the consequences. And I think there's going to be a big revolt taking place in these communities over the coming months.
You know, Daniel, here I'm often, and I think you probably are too, and a lot of people on this network are accused of being culture warriors and so on. But it seems to me that so much of what's happening here with things like this, and you mentioned heritage laws, this is really where the forefront of the culture war is, because, you know, people in the inner cities who are dominated by Greens electorates, Greens voters, they don't understand what's happening, where their food comes from, how their economy works, and decide that they can impose their urban culture around the rest of the country. Is this an element, I think, of it that people are just sick of being told what to do by, you know, Greens sympathizing and Labor that's being pulled by the Greens to the left, folks in the cities?
Well, I think that's a very astute observation, James, and that's exactly what's happening. There's no wind turbines in Warringah. They're just shunting it out to these communities, the solar panels and the wind turbines. Not only do they spoil the landscape, but it's all those economic and social issues that we've just discussed. I think there was a lot of that at play in the Voice referendum, which was a revolt against the inner city elites. They're out of touch. And as you and I have spoken about in the past, there's a big realignment taking place in our nation now with what I call the red Liberals, the working class Labor voters that are now moving towards the Liberals. We've seen that in the Voice debate where 70% of Labor seats voted no. So there's a message being sent from the outer suburbs and the regions to the inner cities that they want to stop that encroachment taking place on their way of life, on their culture. You know, when you come out to a regional community out here, they're proud of what they have. The streets are well maintained. The parks look nice. There's only ever one flag in the square, and that's the Australian flag, because they're proud of it. It's a very different culture and way of life in the regions. And as you rightly say, many of those from the inner cities look down in a very demeaning way towards those out here that are really the heart and soul of our nation.
Well, I'm looking forward to taking a big tour of the regions over the Christmas break. Thank you so much, Daniel, for telling us what's happening out there. It sounds absolutely fascinating and like it's going to set up the next election in a really interesting way. Daniel Wild from the IPA, thanks so much for joining us from Mildura.